So DJI have filed their FCC documents for a DJI FPV Goggle V2. It is what the naysayers of the V1 have been waiting for. I'll wait until the V2 comes out. It's what the early adopters of the V1 have been dreading. Am I going to have to sell all of my stuff and spend the same amount of money in a year's time on a V2 goggle? Well, I actually don't think that this V2 goggle is going to be that useful for us now. This is just speculation, but if you look at what DJI have done in the past and the fact that they have actually filed for 3 things, so there is the DJI Goggle V2, there is a controller and an FPV drone, but importantly, no new video transmitters for us and no new cameras. And when you look at the DJI FPV system, it kind of confirms to me what they have been up to all along. I expected that this system would end up in some DJI proprietary product that is for their consumer base. And the fact that they have got some of us on board, I think was a smart move, because DJI aren't well liked in our community by a lot of people, not by me, I like them. But if they could come up with this amazing FPV HD system that we can just stick on our own freestyle quadcopters, then it would at least get some of us interested in this middle product, which I think they are coming out with. So just recently, a lot of us FPV hobby pilots have been able to use this DJI FPV HD system, and before that as well, to get amazing shots for TV programs that you couldn't get with a DJI product. For example, Top Gear this year, they used FPV drones to get into places that you could never get with a Mavic. And it's my opinion that their camera drone market has become a little bit stale now. I have got a Phantom 4 Pro, I've got a Mavic 1 and a Mavic Air, but all of the recent offerings aren't that interesting to me because the updates aren't that interesting. You may have slightly more megapixels on the camera, more object avoidance and more autonomous features, but as an FPV pilot, that's not really interesting to me because I'm not using those features. So I haven't been interested in the Mavic Mini or the Mavic Air 2 because it doesn't really do that much for me. So DJI have clearly seen a gap in the market, haven't they? We've got these camera drones that can be flown by anyone and they can be used professionally, but then we have got these hobbyist FPV pilots that are getting jobs that maybe other people aren't because their drones and their skills are able to return footage that you can't get with a DJI quadcopter or drone. So what I think these new releases are is a quadcopter or drone that sits in the middle of a Mavic and an FPV freestyle quadcopter, and that's why I think that the V2 goggles aren't going to be that useful to us because they look the same as the V1 goggles. And if you look at this new drone, FPV drone that they are coming out with, it's got a 2-axis gimbal on there, which to me says that they have sort of taken a Mavic style drone and they have turned it into more of a freestyle quadcopter. So we've got video stabilization on there, and we have also got the 3-bladed props. But other than that, I think it's going to be more similar to a Mavic than it is going to be a freestyle drone. The thing that makes me think that is, if you look at where the props are situated on this FPV drone, if you had a wide field of view on the camera, then you would get the props in shot. And of course, we don't want that at all for a camera drone. So I think it's going to be a narrow field of view, maybe like a Spark style camera where they're using image stabilization partly and also a gimbal partly. And it's going to be more of a sort of zoomed in kind of view rather than an FPV view, so we don't get the props in shot. But then you're going to be able to maybe fly a lot faster and get in tighter spaces. Maybe it doesn't have object avoidance. It has GPS for sure if you look at the documents, so it's going to have DJI's own flight control software in there and a GPS return to home switch, but there's going to be more freedom than you get with a Mavic. I think it's going to be more of a cinematography type product rather than the complete freestyle rigs that we build ourselves, where we can, go absolutely anywhere. So you're not going to be maybe flying through multi-story car parks and tiny gaps, but you might be able to, say, do a dive or do a roll or something like that. Now, I've already made a video sort of speculating some of this stuff, but the FCC documents have made things a little bit clearer. So if I could bring it back to the DJI V2 FPV goggles, because I think that's what most of us hobbyists would be interested in. If I look back to when I reviewed the V1 of these goggles, I got a lot of questions, maybe a couple of weeks or a month after, saying, oh, will it work with my Mavic? And of course the answer was no. And I think that's what they've done with these V2 goggles. I think they have made it maybe compatible possibly with OcuSync, or they have connected up some sort of video transmitter to a Mavic style gimbal or a Spark style gimbal, and then that's going to give a better latency for a more camera drone than anything else. I don't think there is going to be a lot of technology in these goggles that is going to be that useful for the FPV community. Something else that makes me believe this is the way that the V1 integrates into the smart controller to get the HDMI out. Now you might think, why would they do that? But if you look at this controller for this new FPV drone, the sticks are centered. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have a mode 1 or mode 2, and each stick has got spring tension on it, so you get sort of like a altitude hold. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Now, everybody wants HDMI out, and you'd think on a V2 that you would get that, but I'm not so certain, Why would they have this smart controller that does lots of extra stuff, and you need to plug these FPV goggles that got nothing to do with the smart controller at all in order to get it to work? Now, might it be the case that this smart controller will work with this FPV drone, and it's sort of an upgrade to the controller for that, so you can use the HDMI out? I just know DJI too well from their previous products to not even assume that that is what they're going to do. I really don't think we're going to get HDMI out. We're going to have to get one of these expensive smart controllers that works with their proprietary FPV drone, and I don't think we're going to see a huge upgrade. Maybe better screens, but is that going to be worth it for the money? Either way, I think I will be buying the V2 goggles, but I don't think I would go ahead and say, sell all of your V1 stuff because it's going to be useless. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. Another thing that's making me suspect that the smart controller may work with this new FPV drone is the fact that they have released documents for goggles, a controller, an FPV drone, but no smartphone. How do you see all of the usual info that you get with a Mavic and stuff like that? Maybe through an on-screen display, sure, but what if it came through all on the smart controller that you would upgrade? Something that I am interested in with this DJI FPV drone is how they are going to deal with the stabilization, because of course that is something that has become really important with FPV freestylers and also commercial work with freestyle drones as well, whether it's using hypersmooth on a GoPro or real steady go. It's something that has become a bit of a standard, and it seems like DJI are using a combination of both. So we seem to have a 2-axis mechanical gimbal and then perhaps electronic image stabilization mixed in like they did with the Spark. What does concern me is the field of view. Of course, that's something that we can do really nicely with a GoPro. We've got a huge wide field of view, so even when you put stuff in real steady go or use hypersmooth, you still get a great field of view, and that would be my concern with this FPV drone. It reminds me of something that I did. So DJI released the Pocket Osmo, and it's got an option on there where it does stabilize the gimbal, but not fully. So you can stick it on a freestyle quadcopter like I did and get similar results, but the problem I found was that there was not enough field of view, and when the quadcopter was tipping up and down, you couldn't really frame your shot very well. So it'd be interesting to see how it does that and how wide the field of view will actually be. Something that I predicted in my last video that I thought DJI would do is have really easy push on and twist props. They look like tri-blades in this, so it's more of a nod to the FPV freestyle community. I don't know why that style of prop is not in our hobby. It's probably to do with the motors, because you have to have the sort of cutout on the motors to do it, but that is such a good idea. I would really like that to become a standard, because the Popo props, they never really took off. I believe they eject sometimes, and if anyone can sort props out, I think DJI would do it just like they have sorted this digital HD FPV system, and I'd love to see that become a standard in the hobby. And they are a tri-blade prop on this FPV drone, which is a nod to us, I would say, and probably more smoother for the camera footage as well, less vibrations, stuff like that. That's why we use tri-blade props. But I would love to see something like that come into the FPV community, because I am so fed up of having a crash and not being able to quickly replace props. That would be such a good thing. Just push on, twist, done. Anyways, that is my speculation on these DJI FPV goggles V2. I don't have one. I'm not under NDA or anything like that. So this is just me piecing things together from what DJI have done in the past and looking at all the documentation and stuff, and hopefully some of it will be right. I don't think I would say sell your V1 goggles right away. I'd say look at what comes out, because I really don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of benefit to us, and it's more going to be the camera drone market buying these proprietary drones. One thing that does interest me though, the battery on the FPV drone, 6S, 2000 milliamp hour. That was one of my predictions, that it would fly for a lot longer than a freestyle drone, but I don't think it's quite going to do the same as what a freestyle drone can do. It's going to meet somewhere in the middle, I think, but it'll be interesting to see anyways. So let's just keep looking at the news everywhere. Look at DJI's YouTube channel. I'm sure we're going to see something maybe in a month or so. Anyways, as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.